Welcome to Women, Work, and Identities, Challenges, and Success. We are so excited to be here in Startup Week. I am Shelly Johnson. I am the CEO of Best U Career Advantage and also Colorado Career Connectors. We want to thank our sponsors for just being awesome, right? So Capital One, the Commons on Champa is supporting the People Track. And we want to make sure that you're agreeing to follow our code of conduct as well as being photographed during our recession as well as being recorded. And be sure to share your experience of the session using hashtag Denver Startup Week. Thank you. These are just some of the sponsors. Chase Bank, Capital One, Quizlet, Slalom, the Commons. And here's more sponsors. Okay, today we are going to talk about women, work, and identities. And when I put this panel together, I was so excited to bring you the winner of last year's pitch competition, Orion Brown, who owns Black Travel Box. Yeah. We also have Guadalupe Hurt, who is the co-founder of Second Act Women. I highly recommend Second Act Women. And also my friend Ellen Lichtenstein, who is from Agent Sync and owns her own business as well. I'm going to move this over.
I was going to say, I can stand back here and do slides.
I'm going to move this over. Okay.
Oh, there we are. We should have been on
there
that slide.
There we are.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are here to talk to you about what it's like to be women entrepreneurs, to have different identities. I am a white cisgender woman. I have 2 children. I started my own business in 2019 after having my own great resignation in 2019. I was the director of talent for Comcast Innovation Labs and all of their technology, product, and experience. And I was so burnt out that I was present, but I can't even remember what I did that year because of stress and overwhelm and just continuing to climb on that corporate ladder. But what did it mean to my soul and to me as a person? So I happily took a severance package and started my own business. And the rest is kind of history. So, Ellen, do you want to talk a little?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to do double duty on the slides here. Yeah. So I'm Ellen Lichtenstein. I own a company called Just Add Communications. We've been around for 2 years. I actually started 2 companies in March or sometime in the spring of 2020. So I have Just Add Communications, which takes my kind of 18-ish long years career of content marketing and production, media, digital, stuff like that. And my other business, which isn't listed here, it's called Leg Up Learning Solutions, and I do things with my horses. I do something called equine facilitated learning, which is basically taking my background educationally and professionally in communications and combining it with horses to help people learn stuff like better communication and leadership skills, better, empathy and compassion for the people you're leading. So that's also, I started that again in 2020, so it's still fairly new. So if anyone would like to talk about that specifically, I have plenty of communications clients, but I would love to talk more about horses and what we do with them.
And I personally, just a month ago, had equine therapy. It is the cool. I know, but it was so cool. So I highly recommend that. Lupe?
Hey everyone, good morning. My name is Guadalupe Hurt. I am co-founder of Second Act Women. We are a pro-aging community for women 40 and 50 plus to gather and grow and develop personally and professionally. We come together online and in person. We're out of Colorado, so if y'all are in Denver more frequently, join us. We'd love to have you. But we provide a series of events, signature conferences, education opportunities, but most importantly, we provide connection and community to help our women be seen, supported, and to move up wherever Second Act takes them.
Okay then, I love it. Hi everyone, my name is Orion Brown. I'm the founder and CEO of Black Travel Box. As you said, I did win Denver Startup Week's pitch competition last year. It was absolutely insane. It was really, really cool. My company, Black Travel Box, is a personal care products company for travelers of color. So everything that we make in forms and formats that travels well, it gets through TSA, and it's actually inclusive. So it's made for a wide variety of hair textures and skin tones. So we're a little bit different in the Startup Week space. We're more tech enabled. You can find us on Macy's.com. You can find us on our own.com as well. And that is half of my life. I also spend quite a bit of time with X Strategy, so I am still a brand and business consultant doing a lot of consumer insights work and things of that nature. So really excited to be here and to share the stage with these women. This is just going to be fun, so I'm looking forward to it.
When we talk about identity, there's a lot of different ways that we can talk about identity. And we'll get to that in just a second. But first of all, we're going to talk about the facts, okay? When I was putting this together, I wanted to tell you a story about the impact that COVID has had on women, specifically women in Colorado. And at the height of COVID, unemployment got to be 14.5%. Now, 63% of jobs lost between February 20 and January 22 were held by women. 63%. 25% of women are now considering leaving or downshifting their career because, let's face it, and how many of you can relate to this? You don't want to work those hours anymore. You want to start your own business. You want to understand what your own soul is telling you and passion. And so you might be amongst, how many of you can relate to that number? Right? That's why you're here. 29% of full-time working mothers' median earnings are 29% lower than working fathers. Now, Colorado is the first and of its type in trying to do this because of the Equity Pay Act that we passed. And all job descriptions in Colorado, and California just passed it today, are now listing total compensation or some type of compensation on the job descriptions. But there are 2.2 million fewer women in the labor force than there were. This is taking us back to the 60s, and we still have not recovered. And so women and going into business, what's super, super exciting is that 16.8 million Americans are self-employed. And that number is just increasing because, believe me, I spent over 20 years in a corporate environment, and it had its perks, and I miss some of those perks. But having the freedom and having the faith that you can start what you want and do what you want, 10.39% of Colorado has the highest percentage of women in the workforce, of women that are owning their own businesses. And we have ranked this way since they started doing this, which was about 4 years ago. So you are in an environment that highly supports women as being business owners. Self-employed women saw a 4.3% increase between 2019 and 2021. The actual number of men who started businesses decreased by 1%. Because we are badass and we are meant to be in front of things. So if you're in Colorado, you definitely have a great environment. Again, we're the best state for women. Next, please. Okay. 2.37 of all women in Colorado own their own business. You might have your own side gigs. Who has their own side gigs here? Who has their own businesses here? Right? Look at you. Look at the women that are focused. And women in the United States, collectively, 5.6 billion, right? That number is just going to continue to go up. So let's get started. As I was talking about, women lead 29.2%. And also the face of investing toward women is changing. There's a lot of investment strategies that you can learn this week in Denver Startup Week. And I'm sure that Orion and Lupe and Ellen could chat a little bit about that as we continue. Next. Okay, let's talk about identity. you mind talking about identity?
Sure, I can I'm just basically going to read what the slide says because I can't say it as good as I wrote it the other day. Yeah. So we thought about like the dictionary definition of identity, and I said, no, I don't like dictionaries. Let's talk about my passion, social psychology and sociology and stuff like that. So social psychology's identity theory proposes that identities are complex, evolving, and multifaceted. Who agrees with that? Do you have a complex, evolving, and multifaceted identity? Awesome, as I do too. So every person possesses multiple identities that center on any number of personal or social characteristics. For example, someone can be a woman, a mother, Black, a software engineer, a business owner, and a vegetarian. And those are like 5 I could think of right off the top of my head because we all probably have 20 or more. So each of our identities has motivations, values, and behaviors associated with it, and which identity is at the forefront changes across time and context. And I think that's something we can all relate to as well, especially with the whole the idea of bring your whole self to work. I was in a session yesterday where a lot of people were like, no, we don't really want to bring our whole selves to work. We like the separation of getting to focus on our work selves and our personal selves, but that's a whole different conversation. So simply put, defining identity is not simple.
Okay, and Orion.
Yeah.
How do you identify, and what are some of your cross identities?
So I identify as a female, a Latina. I'm a mom, a wife, a daughter. I think for me, some of the intersections kind of come into play in spheres where I take on positions as I go. Like, for example, I didn't start off as a wife and I didn't start off as a mom, right? Like, those are things that are acquired through time and experiences. And so I think that to your comment about being complex and ever changing, it's something that I think we step into depending on the facets of our life. Like right now, I am stepping into middlescence, which for me now, I am a middlescent woman, not just a woman. So I think it depends on how you slice it, dice it, but I think you can really kind of pay homage to where you are in your life if you really kind of create those labels or those identities depending on where you find yourself at that time and place.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I mean, when I identify myself, it's a reflexive process as well, right? So when I walk into spaces, there are identities that are placed upon me that I have to grapple with. And it may not be a difficult grappling, but it's something that I have to address, and I have to decide whether or not I want to reflect that identity back or if I want to push against that and push against those expectations. So I'm a Black woman who's an entrepreneur. I'm also an employer. I am a daughter. I am a guardian. I am a number of different things. I'm also a nerd and closet academic, sometimes a little bit of a wino. There's a lot of different things that can bubble up that are things that I choose to associate with, choose to lean into. There are things that I'm aspiring to be. There are hats that I'm aspiring to have. And so from an identity space, when they say, fake it until you make it, that's an identity challenge, right? That's who do I want to be and how do I exude that? How do I portray that? How do I, dare I say, project that in a neutral way? And how do I create that person I want to be while I'm becoming that person? So identity to me is so multifaceted. It's not just moment in time, but it's like moment in space and how you're pushing through and where your head is at any given moment.
And so the way I identify is as a woman, but also non-binary and genderqueer and queer, and as white, but also Jewish, and also a lot of these other ones that you brought in I love, like nerd. I'm not even a closet academic. I'm just like a proud academic. Yeah. And as that crazy horse person, I get that a lot because there's a bumper sticker that says, ask me about my horses. Do you have all day? So that's really true. So yeah, this is just a few of mine.
I am she and her. I am about as white bread as you come, but I think of myself as a Latina. I've lived all over the world. I'm actually leaving in 2 days for Portugal and Spain. I speak fluent Spanish. I've lived in Japan, so I'm a global citizen. I have led DEIB, or Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, for Honeywell Aerospace and been on the Inclusion Council at Lockheed Martin. And so I have had white privilege, but I also know what it's like to be the minority in another country. And that is why I am so passionate about identities. And I'm super excited to continue. Next slide, please. We got that one. Okay, I'd love to ask the panelists, how have your identities played a role in your professional life? And Lupe, I'll start with you on this one.
So for me, I come from a family that immigrated from Mexico. And so I am the first to go to college here in the US and the first to start up a business in my community. And so for me, identity has really played a significant role because I have found myself in rooms where I am the only Latina, or I am the only first generation. And so that's always been, I think, something that has weighed on me, but also a sense of pride in the same kind of breath, if you can imagine, that I'm out there representing, creating opportunities for other Latinas to see themselves on stage, to see themselves starting up and creating impact in our communities, and to be seen. So my identity has really helped me to embrace where I've come from and really kind of take solace knowing that I am pushing through a lot of of those barriers, a lot of those ageist beliefs, or a lot of those ideas of what or how I should act or what I should be doing, and defining my own space, my own opportunity to create me and to show up as me, and to hopefully create an impact that inspires others to step in and find themselves along the way. So it's been a beautiful journey, and I continue to learn every day from other people that I cross paths with as well.
Orion.
So I spent a good, 17 or so years in corporate. And I've worked in banking, JP Morgan Chase. I've worked in tech, Oracle. I've worked in food, Nestle, and Kraft Foods. So I've been a lot of different places and spaces. It's such an interesting thing how identity, how I present, and the assumptions that people have about me end up in every single professional review. You should whisper more. It's intimidating when you yell at people. Well, you see, it comes in handy. The talk to the hand attitude. This actually happened in a conversation, and she kind of did this, and I was like, we haven't done that since the 90s. Come on, honey, get your stereotypes up to date. Let's roll it back forward. And so, when I first started my career in banking, I came directly out of college. I left University of Chicago, wide-eyed and nerdy as hell. I'm like, the whole world is gonna be dorky like me. And I realized very quickly, your hair better be in a bun. You better have pearls. You better come equipped. Don't change your hair because people won't recognize you in the office at all whatsoever, even though you're the only black person in the department. I didn't know that was you. And those moments, while they can be kind of like, funny-ish anecdotes, can be very stressful for a person coming up through their career, trying to make their mark within a space. Every time I show up a little bit different, I get erased and I have to start over. So understanding that those types of dynamics exist are really, really important no matter what the identity is, because we all have identity blind spots, right? You have the thing that you are, the next person has the thing that they are, and if you don't pay any attention to who they are, you won't see them. So for me, going through my career, it was a lot of finding myself, finding what identity I wanted to lean into, accepting the identities that were placed upon me, and then honestly taking a moment and saying, F this. I'm going to push back on that. Let's close the door. We need to have a talk about that conversation that just happened. And by the time I got to that point in my career, I had about a good 5 weeks vacation. So I was like, I feel senior enough that we can do this. Coming into entrepreneurship, I thought that my experience was going to be enough. And it wasn't, because it's the same conversation, coming into spaces, establishing, erasing, and starting over again. And so I think the challenge is, no matter if you're in a corporate setting, if you're in a startup, or wherever you're at in between, it's understanding how not only your projected identity and who you identify as, but what the world sees in context, whether you're in country or out of country or wherever it is, how those things sort of intersect in a number of different ways, and then making those decisions where to push and pull.
So what's the question? How has your identity played a role in your, okay, yeah, mine, probably the role of my identity in my professional life, it's kind of a paradox because it both can't be overstated in some ways, but then it was also kind of invisible in other ways. I have long identified as queer and genderqueer and non-binary, and I forgot to mention I have some invisible disabilities, but these are not things that I've been open about in the workplace until really 2020 when I started my own businesses and I was my own boss, and I was all of a sudden like, no one can tell me how to act, what's professional, what's not professional, that kind of thing. So for the first 15 years of my career, I was very much not open about those things, and kind of similar to you, Orion, I got like, so in my performance reviews, it would be like, your work product is great, but you're too emotional. Well, I have some psychological issues that influence emotional regulation, and that's part of a disability that I have. So it's really hard to be in the workplace being constantly told, we love your work, but just don't get so excited about it, or don't get so upset when someone, criticizes you or whatever. But I think women in general, we always get that you're too emotional. And on the gender side, I don't fit a lot of female, feminine stereotypes, and that has penalized me a lot in the workplace because I've literally been told by the last company I worked for as an employee, the CEO doesn't want you around because you don't fit her image of what someone in her presence should look like on her executive. I was hired in a very high-level position to be a communications person for the CEO, and I interviewed for that job with a wig because I moved from Iowa, and that's not where I'm from, but most recently before here lived in Iowa, and I was I had to present myself very differently because I was in a very conservative community, and on the weekends I looked like this, and at work I was wearing very professional like pantsuits and I had a wig. And so I interviewed for this job with a wig, and after I got the job and I was moving to Colorado, I said, screw that, I'm going to be myself. And as soon as the person who hired me saw me as myself, I was told, she doesn't want you around anymore. They couldn't fire me, but I spent 3 years being treated horribly, and basically what they, if you've heard of quiet quitting, you've probably also heard of quiet firing, what they say, that sort of urging people to feel like they need to quit. And that was, it's like, just push them out. Yeah, so I spent 3 years being pushed out of the job that I was hired for because they didn't like the way I looked or presented, or I was too emotional. So I wanted to talk about that stuff because my identities are like, they're multiple, they're complex, they're not what your identities might be, but I think that it's really important. Probably each of us has our own stories of times that something's been held against us in the workplace because of an inherent characteristic of your identity. So I wanted to talk about ones that aren't really commonly talked about.
Is that amazing or what? Thank you so much. Next slide, please. Okay, has any aspect or multiple aspects of your identity ever caused problems for you in the workplace or as an entrepreneur? Well, I think we just heard some of that, right? Are there any other things that you would like to share?
I do think that that's interesting, that it's inherently problematic. Right, so when you ask us how does identity sort of intersect with your professional life, inherently it's problematic. And what is it that we need to do societally to address the fact that it's problematic as opposed to just a fact?
Wow. Okay. What challenges do you face because of your identity or identities that you think others don't face in the workplace and or as an entrepreneur? Orion.
Challenges that I face because of my identity that I don't think others face. I mean, honestly, it depends on the identity that I'm leaning into, right? So there are things that we'll find common. Look, give us a couple cocktails. If this was later in the day, we could all find the things that we lean into together, and those comparisons and contrasts are going to be, we are tiny snowflakes, and there's nothing wrong with it. What I would say is, oftentimes when I come into rooms as a woman, so card-carrying vagina member, I guess. Oftentimes, and this isn't just a male thing, like women do it too, because we all live in the same society that tells us the same things. Like we forget that everybody gets gaslit by the same stuff. So I will have conversations with people and they will be pleasantly surprised that I know what I'm talking about. I was having a conversation with my current employer, God bless them. I don't think they're watching Startup Week, so it's cool. And a senior leader, and we were sitting down, and he was talking about taking his daughters to look at colleges. And I was like, oh, well, did you look at University of Chicago? And he's, no, well, she didn't like, I mean, she thought it was just a little too intense. I said, we're having this great conversation. I'm like, well, you know, I'm biased, but I feel like, you know, she could tough it out. She could figure it out. It'll be great. And then he, like, at the end of the conversation, he's like, wait a minute. Oh, you went there? Oh. And it just like, you could see and he didn't mean anything by it, but you could see the wheels turning and the shift and the perception and like how many other things am I not understanding here? And that's something that I think is unique to being a woman, to being a woman of color, to being a Black woman in certain spaces, depending on the context. So there's always something different.
Okay.
So our organization wouldn't exist if we didn't face some of the challenges that we face as women in our 40s and our 50s, specifically women of color or even women in general that are over 40 and 50. And what we've seen is that some of the struggles that we face are access to capital, access to tools and resources, this idea that for some reason at 40 and 50 plus, you shouldn't be starting up. You should already have your game plan as to what you want to do. And boy, if you don't have, that house or that career or that lucrative job, then you missed the boat somewhere. You're not you're not on track compared to what society has told us to where we should be. And so there is this constant judging, in addition to throwing in their lookism, because we are green, we are getting these beautiful lifelines. It's a sign of the fact that we've been around, that we've got this amazing, just years of experience at our back, but yet on that same face, people are dismissing you, saying, well, we had real conversations in our community about when COVID happened and women were going gray, and then we started to go back to work. Should I go gray or should I color my hair before I go back to work? These were real, legit conversations because there is this idea that unfortunately we are so just obsessed with culture, with youth in our culture, that we don't value what the beauty, the age, the wisdom, the achievements, the everything that comes with age. And so for us, it's this idea that we need to kind of really bounce back and start to help prove and show, not prove, let me take that back, demonstrate, remind people that we're not going anywhere and that we're here for a reason and we have value and we bring knowledge, but we just need to remind everybody else about it because we already know what we bring to the table, but sometimes there's that disconnect.
So I feel like I've already covered this one, so I'll pass it on to Shelly, but I just want to say one quick thing is that I have been shaving my head for a long time. This is the way I love to look. I feel more comfortable this way. I have a great tattoo, which apparently can't see on Zoom. I just learned. I was going to say, anyone who's worried about aging and looking gray, shave your head. People will think you're 20 years younger. I mean, I get mistaken for 28 all the time. So, yeah.
Shave your head. Yeah. Or own it, right?
Own the gray.
That's just it. A lot of this is about owning it. And this is a little bit off of a tangent, but when I left corporate, I left a very lucrative job with excellent perks, benefits, etc. And thinking about how I was going to make that 6 figures again as the breadwinner when my husband was a stay-at-home dad, and trying to get over that fear that you may have as a woman. For me, I spent a lot of time couch surfing. And what I mean by that is I had a week where I just could not get off the couch. And so the faster you can have people in your life, have people that help you lean into that faith, whether it's a coach or I have an amazing business coach, and now I get to coach others on how to build their own businesses. So a lot of times it's about leaning into your identity of who you're meant to be and getting rid of that fear. And so some of the challenges are just mental fitness, right? Of being in who are you? Who is your identity? What do you want to do in that next chapter? And then when you figure that out, surrounding yourself with people who lift you up, who truly know you, and that I heard in the last panel that you can totally be your authentic self, no matter what identity that you have. Next slide. Okay, now we're going to jump into, has your identity ever been a benefit as an entrepreneur, founder, an example, within certain client populations? I'm going to let you take this.
Well, I'm going to soon pass it on to you two, but just real quick, I think that in one way it has helped me. I can reach out to the queer community in a lot of the work I do, mostly in my equine facilitated learning, more so than marketing and communications, but it's come into play there too. And, you know, people do like to do business with people that they feel have things in common with them or are part of their community. And I have clients who will drive an hour to my property when they could do this a lot closer to home, but it's like, you know, we're a queer family, we want to support you as a queer business owner, so I do get that benefit.
I think that's spot on, and I think that ultimately a big piece of it is authenticity. So oftentimes when any of us create companies, it's because we've identified a white space in the market, and we didn't do that as an academic exercise. We didn't sit down and go, okay, so where's the biggest white space in any market, and let me go find and make something there. We actually had some level of interest in it. We had some level of personal experience with it. And so with that creates connectivity and story and narrative around why you built your business, how you're building your business, and being able to bring identity as a part of that brings a lot of authenticity. The first time I ran some ads for Black Travel Box, I started getting comments where people were like, is this really by Black people though? Did somebody who actually knows what they're doing make this? Because oftentimes we see this in the LGBTQ plus community where people will put rainbows on stuff for a month and then they forget about it and then they wholesale all the rainbow stuff and bring in the Christmas. So we see these spaces where there is like sort of marketing pandering and businesses kind of, tap dancing and saying that they're about something. But when you can bring in your authentic identity, whether you are a just avid golfer who has a terrible handicap, like whatever it is, if that's something that relates to your business, that's something that your clients and your customers can connect with and they get about you, it doesn't even actually have to be fully related to the business, but bringing your authenticity and identity creates trust and connectivity in a way that I just think is invaluable.
Well, and to break it down, for me, authenticity is being vulnerable. Letting people know that, we're, especially in our company, like I've got my work wife over here doodling on her phone in the front row, Ms. Barbara Brooks. She and I have had some real kind of breakdown, like ugly cry sessions in front of some of our women about where we are with our business, with our community, some of the challenges that we've faced. So to be able to show women that, hey, you know what? Yeah, we may be leading a company. We may be, running a community that's 10,000 plus strong and growing. We may have just, graduated Facebook's Accelerator program, but you know what? We're still in the thick of it. We still, are struggling sometimes to get stuff off the ground, but every day is a new opportunity. And so I think for me, authenticity really is rooted in vulnerability, but it's also rooted in relatability and making sure that our women feel like, hey, you know what? I'm not just an imposter up here telling you what to do, but I'm right there, girl, right next to your shoulder, doing the same thing you are to get my company off the ground. And let's share resources, let's share tools so that I can help you avoid the pitfalls that maybe we went through and vice versa.
I'm going to add to this the importance of having that courageous vulnerability, of knowing that you're not perfect and knowing that you do have something to offer. I'm an executive coach. There are thousands of executive coaches, right? So me being courageously vulnerable with my potential clients actually draws them to me. Of my story of 2019, my ability to look white but feel like a Latina. So use your story as a strength, not a weakness, and lean into truly who you are with that, because that is who you are. That is your identity. So I'm a recruitment consultant and I work in the construction industry. And let me tell you, I have yet to interview a woman project manager for construction. Yet I ask the question to all of the men that I interview, how are you promoting diversity within your project, right? So this is something that all men, all people need to lean into, because after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, I don't know about you, but I think things are pivoting. I hope things are changing. Are you seeing that? Yes? Okay, let's go to the next question. What inspired you to become an entrepreneur? Orion?
What inspired me to become an entrepreneur was a frustration and irritation with the marketplace. I was not the kid that sold lemonade. I was like, they got stores for that. Why? Why would I? This doesn't make sense for me. I don't want to spill it. I was very comfortable. I actually challenged myself on that one. I'm very comfortable in taking that regular check. Don't get me wrong. I love having frivolous insurance, like legal insurance. You pay $9 a month. You have no idea what it's for till you get like a parking ticket. So for me, I was very comfortable sort of in that very corporate space. It's what I grew up in. But as I mentioned earlier, I had lots of vacation time, and I would take these vacations, and that would be my decompression, because evidently I wasn't as comfortable as I thought I was. Whole other conversation. We'll talk about it later. But this idea of like, I would go out and I would go on these trips, and I would find myself spending time being frustrated with basic personal care. Like, why can I not use this shampoo? Why is this lotion leaving my skin ashier? If y'all don't know what ashy is, you have a little bit of melon. Looks like you've been like hitting dust and chalk like a gymnast. Like, it's not a good look. Why aren't these things working for me? Why am I running out to stores? I was in Japan and I was running out to the commissaries on base to see, and I'm like, well, you've got American stuff. There should be, nope, I forgot. This is just like Iowa, which is the same challenge. So whether you're in Toledo, Ohio, or Toledo, Spain, it's the same frustration. And so when I thought about creating the business, I didn't even actually move on it immediately, because I was like, I know somebody's doing this. This is so basic. You are a person with skin and hair. Somebody's trying to sell you something. Somebody is trying to do it. And then I started going to industry events and, going to expos and going to business and product to product, and seeing most of the spaces did not recognize that I existed. And then those that did were people that don't look like me talking to other people that don't look like me about people that don't look like them. And I started getting pissed, and that's how I ended up being an entrepreneur. I was like, well, crap, I have to do something about this. And that really was the start for me.
Get pissed and do something about it. Amen. That's such a great, how many of you are doing that now? Yeah, you get pissed and you do something about it. Awesome. Yeah, Lupe.
Great motivator.
I'm going to jump on it wasn't that we were pissed. More so that it was very serendipitous. My work wife at the time was, yes. Totally just platonic. Very true. But no, like at the time, she was trying to get back into corporate America. I was trying to get into corporate America. I'm a 4-time entrepreneur. 2 of my businesses have been started up with Barb. And what we found was that we were getting the Dear Jan letters. Like instead of the Dear John, like everyone's like, not a culture fit, too much experience, too expensive, or altogether ghosted in some instances. And so what we found was that we weren't the only ones going through this experience. A lot of women were in our shoes. A lot of women were like, I just got let go and I've been at my job for like 20 some odd years. What do I do now? So there was this sense of just urgency and nobody was doing anything about it. And the reality is that ageism is one of the only isms in the US, or actually around the world, that is not being taken seriously like our other isms, right? Like it's the only one that of corporations that currently have DE&I initiatives on their in their company, only 8% look at age. And we, like I mentioned earlier, we live in a youth-obsessed culture, so women are let go, and granted, it affects men as well too, but nowhere near to the degree that it affects women. And so women are being let go, and then there's this like plateau of me not being able to get a job. And so now what? We're living to be 81 plus. I need money, just like everybody else. But yet, I'm being barred out. I'm being left on the doorstep, saying you no longer have value because you're over 40. Nonsense. Well, actually, I'm going to say bullshit to that, right? Because that's totally true. It's really what I mean. And to just say, you know what? So we got pissed. We got pissed and we're like, no, this has to change. And so we created the community, which now we're having conversations with corporations to just say, you guys got to get on the bandwagon. Like stop, subscribing to these outdated ageist beliefs that no longer serve anybody. And that's why we're here today.
And my answer is the same. I got pissed and I did something about it. And I had been working for about 15 years across a variety of industries, variety of companies, variety of different types of companies. I started in the media industry and television production. I ended up moving into corporate communications and somehow found myself in the insurance industry doing marketing and writing. And in every situation, it was the same thing. Like I said, it was always, we love the work you're doing. Everyone loves the content you produce, but you're too demanding, you're too assertive, you're too rigid, you're too emotional, all these things. And I got really pissed at being told that I wasn't good enough. And I started my own business. And I just want to say, I had my first employee within 6 months. Now 2 years into my business, I have 2 employees. Now this is not me personally. I don't bring home that much money, but my business has brought in about $450,000 in 2 years, guys. So. And I was 2.5 years ago, I was sitting in a corporate job being told, you're really not that great. Why don't you just stay over in your lane and do what we'd like you to do? And that's horrible and demoralizing. And there's no reason for any of us to sit there and listen to that and believe that. But that's where I was at before I started my business.
Amen.
I started my business because I was pissed off at corporate. Yeah. And I was pissed off that I couldn't be my authentic self in corporate, even though I kept growing and growing and growing. And so I used that, and some of the other people that I worked with were pissed off too because they couldn't get along with the EVP at Comcast, and I did. And so they're like, oh, I'll put you on retainer and you can help coach me how to get along with the EVP. And I'm like, okay, I'll do your resume. I'll coach you on that. I just kept in it. And I haven't brought in those numbers, but I am definitely into the 6 figures now in 2.5 years.
Yay. I feel like that's a t-shirt in the making, right? Like I was pissed off, so I started up. Like just an idea,
so
right?
I started up. Okay, awesome. How is the face of investment changing, and how has that impacted entrepreneurs? Lupe, I'll let you take that one since you had that deep sigh.
Well, where to start? I mean, I think there's still a huge divide. Not too long ago, there were several reports that came out that showed that women were getting only about less than 3% of investment in startups. And specifically, it was organizations that had both a female and a male partner. So I don't even know if you divided that even just to female entrepreneurs, how much funding they actually were getting. Throw in the identity color, or I mean the race card in there, and all of a sudden you've got less than probably 1% of entrepreneurs that are getting funding. And I just feel like there is this idea that for many of us, I didn't grow up with that background. I didn't have, my parents or my cousins or uncles or whatever it was, they didn't have their own proper businesses. They did the whole corporate, realm. And so I was not exposed to the connections, to the ins and outs of how to kind of navigate this landscape. And nor did I get it taught. I wasn't exposed to it in school. It's a lot of hands-on that I've had to do. And it's been a lot of kind of just reaching out, asking for help, and sometimes feeling embarrassed that I don't know all of the details that have put me in front of potential investors that could invest in me, right? I don't necessarily always know the jargon, for example. But the reality is that that's where the opportunity there lies. Companies are being started up by women and women of color in droves. And we are one of the highest producing female sectors out there, business professionals, yet we're being constantly overlooked, dismissed. We have like the largest concentration of micro businesses that are ready to scale, but yet we need access to capital and we need access to resources. And I think that's where organizations, especially like the City Initiative with the fund that they are now introducing with a new community transformation fund that Danielle Schutz is leading, organizations like that need to be more prevalent in our community and helping to kind of not just give money and think that that's the Band-Aid solution, but really work with those entrepreneurs to kind of really show them the whole breadth and gamut of what it is to create not just a company, but a successful company.
So it's interesting. The investment landscape to me it's a very slow-moving turtle in the sense of what we consider a popular investment. So most people think VC, then they think angel, and they miss that there's debt instruments. There's a lot of different things out there, crowdfunding. And so to the point, when we look at black women in particular, 0.004% of VC money is 400ths. If y'all don't know math like that, it's 400ths of a point of a percentage is what we're actually getting. And people will argue, well, but VC is only giving out 2% of the money that goes out anyway. Well, 400th of 2% is still like 3 people. Like, let's just be honest. That's rough math, y'all. Don't hold me to it. The flip side to that is that you see a lot of angel investors think that they're VCs because they watch Shark Tank, and it's like, you have a $12,000 check. I am not flying out to take you through my financials for 4 days on my own dime. Like, this was an actual conversation, by the way. He wanted me to go to Canada. Knew nothing about my business or my category. Was like, oh, I'm willing to, I usually write a good 15K, maybe a 20K check. Ooh, that's so exciting. So that is its own challenge. One thing, though, that I think is a massive disruptor is the crowdfunding space. So since we've gotten softening on Regulation D, which, by the way, if you're not familiar with Regulation D and how becoming an accredited investor technically works, it is by definition exclusionary to an extent that is almost laughable. If those of you who are a little bit younger than those of us, women didn't have credit cards until the 70s. Like, that's insane. Just let that sink in. Like, or a checking account, you couldn't own your own stuff. So how would you ever become an accredited investor if you don't have $1 million net worth or make $200,000 or more in income? And I think that goes to $300,000 or $400,000 if you're a two-parent household or two-person household. So that accreditation piece is something that's been very exclusionary. Now we have opportunities to go into WeFunder and different platforms and do micro equity investing, which allows people to come in with $1, $100, whatever it might be, and begin to invest in businesses. The reason why that's helpful, beyond the fact that it democratizes wealth, because it allows people access to more speculative markets that have higher returns than what you're getting in your bonds if you have them in like a mutual fund or whatnot. This also, from an entrepreneur standpoint, exposes you to more people that have a higher likelihood of getting one of those facets of your identity, getting one of those facets of your why, understanding where you're coming from, and then going, I get that. Okay, that makes sense. I could totally invest in that. Because oftentimes when you go into rooms, homogenous rooms, in whatever it may be, if you go into a room full of tech people, let's take it outside of gender and like identity. If you go into a room of tech people and they're like, we'd like to try something new and invest in something different, and you want to sell them, a new toy, the next Lego, which, by the way, Lego makes bank, they're going to have a really hard time getting it. They're going to have a really hard time. You're going to have to translate and go, well, the block is technically in beta, so they understand what it is that you're saying. And so when you're able to get into front of markets that it's like, oh, I've got kids at home. I know exactly what you're saying. And no, I do not want to step on another block like that because my life flashed before my eyes. Like, that kind of insight and that kind of connectivity is really, really important. So having things like crowdfunding where you can get in front of new audiences, different money, it may be smaller pieces, but those are the building blocks to creating that connectivity that allows investors and entrepreneurs to truly connect in a way that builds value.
There's a lot of information this week on VCs and investments and how the face of investments is changing. So I really encourage all of you to look at those different sessions. The last question that I'm going to pose to our panel is, what advice, if you can, would you have for potential entrepreneurs, for women or those with different identities? Can you go to the next slide? Orion, we're going to start with you. And if you want to contact any of us, we have QR codes that lead directly to our websites. Orion, you're up.
First, get somebody that knows how to take good pictures because it comes in really handy. I don't know how to do a selfie, so I had somebody do it for me. So as an entrepreneur, I have gone through a lot of emotional roller coasters, and it's not just because I'm a woman. It's not a monthly thing, although that is another factor. But one thing that I've learned in this journey, having come in with a lot of confidence and being like, logically speaking, the smallest business I ever ran was a $30 million business. I might actually know what I'm talking about. Logically speaking, I have the insight of being my consumer. Logically speaking, I'm looking at white space and what the innovation space looks like, and I'm finding the market and all of the opportunities in the right consumer, and I've done my 5 forces, my 4 boxes, my everything. I've got so many circles and Venn diagrams, right? I came in going, I get this stuff. And then I started going into rooms and coming out and going, do I get this stuff? I'm not sure that I get this stuff, because people are looking me dead in the eye and being like, you sound like you know what you're talking about. You do. I must not get it. It must just be me. And so having those conversations took me down several notches, which I don't need to be down notches, baby. I'm here, right? Like, none of us do, no matter what it is that you're trying to do. And so what I had to learn how to dig back out of that and to lean back into what I knew. So whether you're starting a business, have been doing a business, whether you're working for a startup and you're trying to move ahead and get that equity, ask for it up front before they get big. Whatever it is that you're trying to do, make sure that you are leaning into what you know. And people will try to gaslight you. That is a really popular skill set these days. It didn't used to be. It used to be weird. It used to be, here and there and sort of, narcissistic. Now it's a skill set that people have built up. Their own defense of saying, nope, it's not you. This is not the droid you're looking for. Told you I was a nerd. And they'll give you this sense of reality that isn't the reality that you're in. So while taking advice, while taking mentorship, while getting support, also take it with a grain of salt and remember what you know. Know what you know and be honest with yourself, and that will take you really far.
So I'm going to build on that and say everybody's going to have an opinion about what you do and what you don't do and how you're doing it right and why you're doing it wrong. I think, in our opinion, I would say surround yourself with your A team, with those individuals who believe in what you do, see your beauty for what you bring to the table, see your knowledge, and have your back. Because to Orion's point and to our experiences, there's going to be a lot of lows, more lows probably sometimes than highs. So you need someone, a group, to rely on to have your back, to help you get through those, because in the end, you're onto something and all those naysayers are just trying to get in your way. So don't give them the mind share or the timeshare.
So I've only been an entrepreneur for about 2 years, but I probably have a ton of advice. But to keep it quick, the best thing, the biggest piece I would say to anyone thinking of doing it is just being authentic, because I have found more customers and clients and people have come into my life when I was finally able to just be like, this is who I am, this is what I do, take it or leave it, because trying to fit into someone else's mold didn't get me anywhere. Although I did make a lot of great connections throughout my career and I did a lot of great things, got a lot of great skills, but it didn't get me to where I wanted to be in life.
My piece of advice is to follow your gut. Follow what you are passionate about, and also spend time with kindergartners. Don't forget to play, because this is serious business of trying to make money. And surround yourself, like Lupe said, with people that you can trust, you can be really vulnerable with, and get a coach that can help you to build whatever muscle you need to be built so that you can lean in to being your best self, so that you can help whatever clients or services that you want to provide. So whatever identities that you have today, lean into that. We're so grateful for Denver Startup Week. Thank you, Orion, Guadalupe, and Ellen, so much. And enjoy Denver Startup Week, everybody.